Look, every Harry Potter fan has a ranking that they think is correct. Some people say the Goblet of Fire is the peak of the series. Other people say Prisoner of Azkaban is where it really starts to come alive. And I know more than a few people who are still recovering from the Deathly Hallows. Now, of course, there's a grain of truth there, but every ranking I've seen is missing a lot, which is why today I'm ranking the Harry Potter books from the worst to the best based on writing, atmosphere, role in the series, character development, reread value, and a number of other factors, and probably a dangerous amount of personal bias as well. And look, I know that these placements, some of them are going to ruffle some feathers, but let's put that aside and let's get to the truth, shall we? Starting with number 7. The weakest book in the Harry Potter series has to be the one that is the middle point, and that is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Now, a number of people say this is their favorite book, and honestly, I can see that because it is, in terms of entertainment value, very stellar. In terms of going through the Triwizard Tournament, very interesting. But there's a number of weak points in this book that makes it just a tier lower than all of the other Harry Potter books. There's a whole side arc plotline with Hermione going through the House Elves. It's called SPEW, the Society for Protection of Elvish Welfare, that really has no business in this book. It doesn't help further the plot, it doesn't help overall, and that's one of the main reasons that I don't love this book. At the end of this book, the climax, and no spoilers, of course, this is really an important part of the series. So arc-wise, this book is very important. But in terms of actual length, it could have been shorter. It's the only book that I would probably say this. Now, there are a number of arguments in other books, but this is the only one that definitely could have used some trimming. And I think even J.K. Rowling admits that this one should have been trimmed down a little bit. So the weakest book in the Harry Potter series, I have to go with The Goblet of Fire, number 4. Not that it's a bad book, but that compared to the others, this is the weakest. The next weakest book in the Harry Potter series is one that a lot of people, I think, rank as the lowest. Now, I don't think this is the weakest book, and I think there's even some arguments to place it a little bit higher, but this book is where it starts to feel a little bit formulaic. It's not the first book in the series, but it doesn't really feel like it's moving forward the way that you would expect in a second book. And this is, of course, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Now, in the Chamber of Secrets, yeah, we are definitely getting introduced some interesting characters. Dobby the House Elf, for example, is a fantastic character. We also have characters like Gilderoy Lockhart, which I think are more challenging. Some people hate him. Some people find him funny, but I think ultimately this book here is okay in terms of character development. It's okay in terms of our characters, about our protagonist, and about our antagonist. We start to get a little bit of interesting insight here. We meet a very interesting young man named Tom Riddle, which we'll learn more about later in the series. But this book here isn't really a part of the larger arc in the way that the later books are. The first book gets a pass because it's the first book, but this book here, I would have liked a little bit more growth, a little more development in the overall arc of the series, and that's, I think, the reason why I rank this a little bit lower than some of the other books. It does start to explore some really interesting ideas. It becomes a little bit darker than the first book, and I think that is more mature. As you read each of these books, it's like you're getting older along with Harry and his friends, and you are forced to confront different realities of the world. This one in particular deals with bigotry and hatred, and there's some really interesting parallels, which we won't get into today because it's beyond the scope of the video. But this book here is a very good book. I actually quite enjoy it, but I do have to rank it as the second weakest. Next up here, now this one is going to be controversial. Not, I don't know if many people would agree with me that this should rank so lowly on the list, but there's a number of reasons that I think Harry Potter, the entrance into Harry Potter, which is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, is not the strongest book. It's very short, as you can see. It's very similar to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and in some ways, I actually enjoy the Chamber of Secrets a bit more than I enjoy the Philosopher's Stone. I rank this a little bit higher simply because it was where everything started, and I think we have to give it some value and some credit for that. We get introduced to some wonderful characters, the whimsy and magic of Hogwarts and of the wizarding world that we get to finally see. This changes everything, right? We didn't have this before, and I think that, being introduced into this world is such a important milestone for so many readers of my generation in particular. This is a book series that really reminded us of the joy of reading, the simple joy of reading, which is why a lot of us read in the first place. For this reason, I love this book. I would recommend it to parents or grandparents looking to get their children into reading because you have to start here. And it's enjoyable, it's easy to read, but it lacks the depth and maturity of some of the later books, which is maybe actually not a bug, but a feature when you're starting kids reading young. You can read this book kind of independently without getting into the rest of the series, or you can read it in the series, which is another feature. But overall, this book's a little weaker because for me, the most important factors of a book is the quality of the writing, how it moves forward the overall story. And in the case for me, the overall story of Harry Potter is the series and not the individual book. And also the importance of the character developments and the interesting parts of the world that we get to explore. And I think other books just have more. Not that this is a bad book, just it actually is maybe a sign of how good a book this is, that it becomes a building block, like the ground stone for the other books to then build on top of later on. But this one is the third weakest book in the series, and I know that's going to be controversial, but that is the truth. Next up here. So now we have probably the darkest, or one of the darkest and the most emotionally resonant books in the series. This is a very important book, and there are definitely components of this book that are absolutely amazing. You can see that my copy is pretty well read. You can't even tell what book it is because it's got tape covering all sorts of the back of it and basically falling apart. And that's a sign of a well-read book. So if you have books like this or children have books like this, that's okay. It's okay sometimes. Certain books we might want to protect, but it's okay if some books are falling apart. It shows that reading is meant to be lived in. It's not something that is stuffy and in the attic, but something that we do actively and dynamically. Now, this book here is the last book in the series, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I think this one is the midpoint in my ranking list simply because there are certain, I wouldn't say it's like the Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire where there are parts that I totally would cut out, but there's parts that could be tightened, parts that could be shortened. I think this is the second least efficient book, or maybe third. There's one other one that we could make an argument for. There are camping segments, for example, that I think draw on a little bit long, although we do get a lot of information about characters and character growth and development, which is important. But the challenge with this book is it is the last book in a series. And in a series, it's very hard to land Act 3, right? If this is the last act in the series, you've built everything up to this. It's always going to be a letdown, particularly if you build it up a lot. And I actually don't think this was as much of a letdown as most series are. I think this is, as far as final books go, stellar. It could maybe have been tightened up a little better in certain areas. There are a few things that pull this weighting down. I would rank this probably higher if it weren't for the fact that there are a few, not to spoil anything, but there are a few characters that, as it's the end of the series, you can imagine there's going to be characters that have things challenging happen to them, or maybe characters that don't make it. And I think the ending of some of these characters is not, doesn't do justice to the character. I won't say anything about who or what or in what way, because that would be a spoiler, but overall, there are a few loose ends that I just didn't feel were satisfactorily resolved. And of course, the final revelations, I always was a bit, I always believed that the twist should have been darker. I'll just leave it at that. But this book here is quite a good book. I just have to rank it a bit lower because of some of those reasons and because of the strengths of the top 3. So now let's get into the best books in the Harry Potter series. All 3 of these books are wonderful. Now, whether or not you are a fan of Harry Potter or you love this kind of literature, these are some of the most sold books in the world. These are some of the deepest, most talked about books on the internet. I meant deepest in terms of the inroads on the internet. And so we have to think about them. There's a reason that these are so popular. So even if you don't love Harry Potter, you feel it's over talked about, these are the 3 that I think are really actually on their own have some literary merit. Now, I'm not saying they're Moby Dick, but what I am saying is all of these books really are beyond just a book in a fantasy series. And there's some interesting character developments and there's some interesting explorations. Now, number 3, I have this one ranked as number 3 because, this is another one. I mentioned there were 2 or 1 left on this list that might have a couple of spots that could have been tightened up a little bit. That's this book here. But I actually think that this loose, meandering pace is so important. It's part of what makes this book this book. It's not as fast-paced or as that dynamic as the other ones because it's after the revelation of what the second half of the series is going to look like, and you have a calm before the storm. And that's what most of this book is. And this book, of course, is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. But when you have a calm before the storm, that's a great time, a great opportunity to explore a lot of very important plot devices, a lot of very important character developments, a lot of things that we don't know about this world yet that we can be exposed to, that will then plant the seeds for what is going to be revealed in the end of this. And that is done very well in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Now, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix also has a lot of personal and character, like emotional development too, which I think is part of what makes it so strong. And new characters that we're introduced to, some of whom I'm a big fan of. So I won't say anything about who and what I'm talking about, but this book I think really segues into the very end of the series. It's the last part that feels still dark, but not the darkness of like, okay, the whole world is on Harry's shoulders, which is what ends up at the end of the series. That's not really a spoiler, right? I mean, you kind of knew that, especially if you've seen the movies. But this one is definitely one that I think could be ranked higher if it weren't for the fact that the last two books had a lot of sentimental value, and I'll think in terms of writing are just wonderful. But this book is well written. There's more depth into Dumbledore, who we get to meet a little bit more from a different angle, but not like the sixth book. That's the one where you get the most depth of Dumbledore. But this is number 3 in the list of the greatest Harry Potter books. Now to the second one. The second best Harry Potter book ever written is, of course, Harry Potter and Prisoner of Azkaban. Now, I know some people are going to say this maybe should be the best book, or some people would say rank it lower. The truth is this is the second best book in the series because it is where the writing style really opens up. You start to see this depth that you come to know and love later on in the series that really I wouldn't expect from modern children's books. Now, I'm a huge fan of Wind in the Willows, anyone who knows me, and I think that level of depth that you see in children's books, in children's literature, is not common anymore, and that doesn't exist. And even the Harry Potter series, as much as I love it, doesn't get to that level. But what it does do in the third book here is we move beyond book 1 and 2, which were popular and good, amazing world, interesting characters, okay, this is compelling, to, oh, this is a deeper, longer series. This is a real, not just hero's journey, but something that children can learn from, something that can get people into reading because it's so fun, and it's got the perfect synthesis of fun and actually some depth. This explores imperfect justice for the first time. We didn't get that before, right? And I think having that element of imperfect justice is it's just so rich. Most kids don't deal with that idea. They don't actually have to contend with the fact that you might have imperfect justice at different times in life. Now, I won't say anything about what exactly that looks like, but great characters, animal-wise. We got Buckbeak. We're introduced to the nefarious Sirius Black, and what will that look like? And then, of course, we get to see not Harry, because we always saw Harry, but Ron and Hermione a little bit deeper than we did in the first two books. They were kind of just friends of Harry in the first two, and now they become really important parts of the whole series. And we're also introduced to a little bit more about Harry's backstory. And so this is a great book. As I said, really the main reason here is how well this is written, the quality of writing. That is why I rank this as the second best book in the Harry Potter series, and probably one that for me is the most nostalgic, I would say, the one that I feel most nostalgic about. Ironically, probably the Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire might be the most fun, enjoyable, even though I ranked that the lowest. So you can see there's multiple contending factors to consider in a ranking like this. But this is the second best book in the Harry Potter series. And finally, we have the greatest book in the Harry Potter series, which is, of course, book number 6, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Now, this is a really, really powerful book. And by the way, this cover art from all of these books here, right? This is exactly what I love. The newer ones, they don't do it justice. Anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent here. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. This has to be the best book in the series, simply because the writing is the best overall, and it explores, it's probably the darkest book in the series. It explores a lot of background, more in Dumbledore than we got before, and what exactly Harry has to do. What exactly is this whole thing that we've been building towards? It's the penultimate one, right? This is the second to last. And if you look at some of the greatest TV series of all time, some of the greatest book series of all time, some of the greatest trilogies, it's usually the second to last one or the middle one in the case of a trilogy. that is the best, because that is where we get the juice. That's where the climax happens. And then the last book is the resolution. And resolution always feels bittersweet. But this is not the most enjoyable book. It's challenging to read, actually. There's a lot of hard stuff that happens in this, but it's just so compelling. And it's really, I would say, the point in this series where, for me, I was like, whoa, this is better than I expected, you know? And that's why when a lot of people say they don't love Harry Potter, they don't think it's a good series, I always say, like, reread the sixth one, because I think that is the spice where you see that it just goes a little bit higher than what you expected in the earlier ones. So anyways, there you have it, guys. That is the definitive ranking of the six Harry Potter books, seven Harry Potter books. And if you are looking for any more interesting information, any insights on literature, I encourage you to like and to subscribe to my channel where I talk about a lot of different things. I appreciate any support that you guys would want to give to me. And thank you for watching until the very end. With no further ado, I wish you all the best and God bless.